Thank you. So, some years in the future, mankind finally develops AGI, the ultimate AI. Super intelligent, has all the sum total of man's knowledge, man's achievements. Every word written has been uploaded to this AI. Okay, it knows everything, every book, every postdoctoral thesis, every social media post, and they sit back and think, finally, we can ask and find out the answers to man's hardest questions, the things we've been grappling with for centuries. So they ask it the first question, which is there a God? And super intelligent AI takes 5 seconds and then comes back and quietly says, there is now. And so God creates mankind in his image, but then mankind creates machines in his image. Where does that leave us? And this idea of actually creating gods, I'll come back to a little bit later. But just to get going, so my name's Chris Goswami. I'm a Baptist minister and a chaplain, and I worked for some decades for Silicon Valley companies and tech companies here. And last year started something called the AI Christian Partnership. I am definitely not at the academic level of some of the folks here today, so you'll either be disappointed or heave a sigh of relief at that. And so this is very much a practitioner's angle at this. And we'll do a little bit of theology at the end. I will try and do that, it's okay. I do want to just start by just doing a little bit of scene setting. And I know for some of you, you can nod off or do your email for 10 minutes. But I'm just going to give a few anecdotes and examples of AI in the last few months, stuff that I'm seeing. And you may have seen or you may not have seen. So this was out a couple of months ago. A crime of our times, a crime that simply couldn't have happened as little as a couple of years ago. So this chap who knows his stuff used AI. So if you've used Suno, S-U-N-O.ai, that writes songs for you in like a minute. It'll give it a topic. Dissent, digital Dissent at Oxford University, it'll write a song. And he used AI to write thousands of songs, thousands of AI-generated songs. He then purchased, legally, hundreds of thousands of Spotify accounts. He paid $10 a month for each account. And then using his tens of thousands of accounts, and a little bit of know-how, he streamed his own songs millions of times. And he actually made $10 million from Spotify. Because they have a revenue share model, and if your song is being streamed more than Taylor Swift, you get a lot of money. Now actually what he was doing was stealing from Spotify because it's a fixed pot, according to who's being streamed, and he was deemed to have stolen from the other artists. But that's a crime that simply couldn't have happened as recently a couple of years ago. How many of you have looked at Notebook LM, Google's Notebook LM? I'm really impressed by it. So Notebook LM from Google, it's been in the UK about 3 months or something like that. And basically you can throw at it any PDFs you want to. Could be an article you've written, could be a blog, could be a PhD paper. Throw it at Notebook LM and it'll do 2 things. First of all, it creates a bot based on that PDF or those PDFs, which you can interact with and converse about the paper. But the second thing, which is really neat, is it generates a podcast based on whatever you've given it. And the podcast is between 2 AI-generated but human-sounding voices. They interact with each other, they riff off each other, they have humour, they laugh. I've found it, I've done a number of these, found them very listenable, worryingly listenable. We did one at the AI Christian Partnership. So one of my friends, Rob Hornby, who's much more academic than I am, he wrote a philosophical article called Meaningful Dialogue after ChatGPT. It's actually a 20 or 30 page academic article from which he did a 6-page easier article. Yeah. Now the 6th page I uploaded to Notebook LM, and within a few minutes there was a dialogue, a really interesting conversation on Rob's paper. I gave it to Rob, and we were both amazed at the very fact that you can do this. It's not the same as reading the paper, but think about students who take a semester's notes, put it on Notebook LM, and it doesn't mean you don't read the notes, but it gives you another way into the notes. form a podcast based on this semester's notes. Google are now extending that so that you, as the human listener, can enter the podcast. So there's 2 AI partners and you now, and you can say, could you tell me about this philosopher Gadamer again? When did he live and who was it? And in real time, the AI will respond. And that's where that piece of technology is up to. I'm sure you've all seen art, music and video. The National Gallery, I don't know if they're still doing this, they had an AI gallery a short time ago. As humans, we have to answer the question, don't we? Is this still art? Or is this somehow a fast food version of human culture? Is it the McDonaldization of art? And sometimes, does it matter if people are enjoying it? I don't know let's see if I can make this happen, but there's a website out there, an OpenAI website called Sora. Is it that one? No. Hang on.
2 more.
That one, yeah, sorry, that one. And let's scroll down a bit. Okay, oh, here we go. So Sora is a demonstration website by OpenAI to show video from text. And again, as little as probably 3 or 4 years ago, if you wanted to shoot this Japanese woman on a Tokyo street at night walking down a wet road, you'd have to put at least 3 people on the plane. Someone to do the camera, someone to do the microphone, producer director, fly to Japan, find the right sort of street, hire an actress, shoot the film, do cutting and editing, etc., post-production. But to do this video, nobody got onto a plane, there's no microphones and no camera involved, and that woman doesn't exist. It's just text to video. At the same time, AI is profoundly affecting society, and we've heard some of that today. I'll give you a few more examples. So, for example, we've talked already in the room today about AI providing a personal tuition. In classrooms, AI providing personal tuition for each child, depending on where they're up to. At Stanford, there's an entrepreneurial course now. And if you go on that, one of the things that they have is what they call the impossible assignment. And the impossible assignment, let's say Beth, if you're on this course, you're not a software engineer, I assume?
No.
Correct, right. So Beth's assignment on the Stanford entrepreneurial course might be, Beth, take, let's say, the last few annual reports for the last 5 years from Oxford University, create some software to do trend analysis, financial analysis, student analysis, demographics, and produce a few charts for us using a software package. Now, Beth doesn't write software, but she can write English, and the programming language of the future is human speech. When I was a software engineer, I had to learn Pascal and C, assembly language, but it is human speech. So Beth's job then is to find the right tool, the right AI tool, create the right questions for the tool, to create this software package, run the software, and then check, qualify what comes back. So education is, I think, transitioning from problem solving to actually learning how to ask great questions and qualify the results. Medicine, I mean, as much as a year ago, I think, when the Bletchley Park Summit happened, Rishi Sunak talked about medical advances, and I think that morning of the summit he'd been to Moorfields Hospital, had a scan of his eye, which AI could use to predict his likelihood not only of eye disease, but of having a stroke or Parkinson's. It's great at taking a single scan and comparing it against thousands of scans. And cancer detection rates, from what I've seen, anecdotally, have gone up between 7 and 13%, because it's so good at detecting that. Finding something in a scan and saying to the human operator, you might want to have another look at this. And if you're one of the 7%, that's pretty important. AI, as we know, is essentially a prediction engine. It predicts output. It predicts a paragraph, it predicts an article, predicts a work of art. And good medicine should be about prediction. taking all the vast amounts of data, all the scans I've had, the blood tests I've had, the diet I have, my physical dimensions, etc., and predicting. And that's what it's quite good at. But at the same time, there are so many examples of post-truth and misinformation. And so here's, not that long ago, there were floods in Florida, Hurricane Helene, and suddenly these pictures started surfacing of Donald Trump heroically up to his chest in some cases in water with a suit carrying a baby. And there's one actually which coincidentally has an American flag floating on the water, which isn't actually wet, but it's just floating there. And these pictures were circulated, and one of the people who reposted them is a US politician. I'm not sure if she's a senator. She's a senior politician, and she started the group Women for Trump. And somebody said to her, you know, these pictures aren't real, they're just fake. And her reply was really interesting, because she said, it doesn't matter to me that they're not real. These pictures are emblematic of Donald Trump. It's what he would do in that situation. So, in other words, I feel it's true. And this is something that we should be concerned about. What is happening as truth becomes more and more subjective. Or as I've said there, the best hoaxes are the ones we want to believe. And I think our challenge is to navigate the extremes. There's one extreme which is AI will solve all our diseases, cure cancer, solve climate change and save the world. The other extreme, AI will destroy humanity. And I would say the third extreme, which I think is the most dangerous, which is it won't actually do anything. If we just wait, it'll go away. It's a bit like faster broadband. Some things will change, but which is actually most people, certainly most Christians, most people in my church, just what, so what? That's also an extreme. So let's talk a little bit about AI in churches. Here's a quote I like. We find ourselves in a new Garden of Eden, technology Garden of Eden, where we must work out which fruits are good to eat and which must be avoided. I'll give you one guess at who wrote that. ChatGPT. So ChatGPT was interviewed on the Nomad Deconstruction Christian podcast and came up with some quite good insights, of which this was one which I wrote down. But let me just say a couple of minutes on some of the applications, because I work in a church every week, targeted at Christian ministry, and there are so many. I'm sure many of you have found that many of these. I was chatting at the break about how we're using some of these. So to produce sermons, and again, a lot's been written on this, and one of my colleagues in the AI Christian Partnership wrote an article essentially kind of pointing out that a sermon should be about the preacher, the personality, the heart, the person of the preacher should be in that, as well as the place of the congregation and where they are at right now and where God is taking them. And actually that's something that you can't really replicate. You're excluding the Holy Spirit if you get a mission to do that. But if, on the other hand, you're a minister and you've had a tough week, you've had lots of pastoral visits, you know what I'm talking about, you know, you've had lots to do, it's Saturday and you need a sermon for Sunday morning, and this thing can produce, I would say, engaging, and if you know your stuff, theologically robust text, then it's a temptation. The other thing that I've found, though, about I feel about using AI for liturgy or prayers or sermons is that, and I'm sure if you've been involved in that, hopefully you would agree, that often it's in the struggle to produce that God is present. It's in the struggle to write my sermons that I find God is evident. It takes me about 12 hours to write a sermon. But struggling with that is where God is forming me. So that it should be about that as well, shouldn't it? Teaching, so theology. So there's, I don't know if one or two of these, but there are a number of theology bots out there, I don't know what else to call them, that will produce, apparently, intelligent responses when you ask questions of theology. And I've tried a few, and what concerns me about at least two or three, I haven't pushed them to any limits, but what concerns me is it's really hard and sometimes impossible to find out where this bot has come from. So who wrote this? I've even typed in a couple of times, where did you come from? Or who wrote you? And the answer literally came back, a very generous group of Christians have written it. Which is like, well, that's like being given a commentary with no author's name, no publisher, but you're told, don't worry about it, it's great, just read it. And this is a worry. I find this worrying. Youth, so one of our members on the AI Christian Partnership is the CEO of Youthscape, Chris Curtis. And he's got a number of concerns, not least that young people, in some cases, will turn to AI bots for counselling and wisdom in preference to a human. And you can understand why. It's non-judgmental, it's secretive, it seems to be private, it's just between you, the two of you. It's there, or as whoever mentioned the website, but one of these AI companion websites has as its tagline, always on your side. And then he was saying to me, he has to put his head into places where this is leading, and what happens, he says, when a kid can produce their own pornographic video with whoever they want in it, from school, from celebrities. So there are some concerns there as well. So that's the kind of just the anecdotal, hopefully a bit of level set. And let's look at a little bit more detail at two topics, apocalypse and idolatry. And I know apocalypse we've already spoken about. And I feel the two topics are related as well. So first of all, on the first topic then, so this is not ChatGPT, this is a real person. Jan Tallinn set up the Centre for the Study of Existential Risks in Cambridge. And he said, he's not a Christian or a faith person, he said the reason we are in charge, rather than say apes or monkeys, is not because we're stronger or faster, it's because we're more intelligent. We now find ourselves at a point where that advantage is handed over to machines. So what about this idea of apocalypse? Well, a few thoughts. The first thing I would say is that AI, in my opinion, is probably more likely to bring about its own apocalypse at the moment as ours. And the reason for that is what's called a model collapse. That AI, an increasing amount of the internet has been created by AI. And of course, predominantly we use the internet to train AI. So increasingly, this training is becoming self-referential, where AI is being trained on data created by AI. And there was an experiment done in Nature magazine. These are images I just created. All of these images I created on Midjourney or ChatGPT. They did an experiment where two AIs were talking to each other, and they were given a topic of conversation, which was 14th century medieval churches. But within 20 iterations, their conversation had become about rabbits. So it has this tendency to lose its way. But one could argue back, well, two humans might have done that. I don't know, but anyway, there is this kind of this concern of self-referential training and model collapse, which has given true human data a premium. And so some of these Silicon Valley companies are buying up human data like nobody's business, particularly if it's behind a firewall, so not easily accessible from the open internet. Which leads us to the idea, so there must be something unique about being human, about being created in the imago Dei, in the image of God, right? I believe that. At the same time, I'm not sure, because I'm increasingly, as I think I asked the question earlier, a lot of what we call creativity and invention, it can actually be is actually formulaic, and can, to a large extent, I think, but I can't prove, can actually be replicated. That some of the conversations I've been in, I wonder sometimes if we as humans are somehow envious or worried about AI. Not sure. But what about AI and the possible end of civilization? Of course, apocalypse is part of Christian theology. So we shouldn't be overtly worried or head in the opposite direction to the idea of apocalypse, because that's what we believe, that God will wind up this age in some way that he knows best. But not in any near or mid-term because of AI, I think, and not least because it's not in AI's interest to get rid of us. It still needs us to switch the power on, change the spare parts, make sure the air conditioning is good enough, and so forth and so forth. Nevertheless, perhaps there are other types of apocalypses, or thinking of apocalypse as revelation. Maybe apocalypse isn't the end of all things. Maybe it's the end for humans of being only human. And so we have this idea of transhumanism, or the use of technology to enhance or extend humans physically or cognitively. And as already been mentioned a few times, AGI, or artificial general intelligence. I don't know, perhaps Beth could say afterwards if there's a proper definition of this term. I don't know that there is, but in general it's kind of, and some people prefer the phrase super powerful AI or powerful AI. But the idea is that AI which is broad enough to do kind of all the cognitive tasks of a human. Not only that, because currently AIs tend to be quite narrow in their focus in what they do, but very broad and generic AI that can do all the things that we could do intellectually. But not only that, it can operate a mouse, it could operate a keyboard, it could appear on video calls as a human avatar. And some people have suggested AGI could choose its own training data. So it literally could decide what to learn next, whether that's cosmology or gynecology or physiology. This idea isn't there yet, but it's what some folks are straining towards. So this idea has led to, Beth used the phrase that accelerations and decelerationist, or doomers, as they're sometimes called. So
doomers are decelerationist.
Yes, accelerationists versus decelerationist or doomers. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, mixed that up. And there, the answer, these tend to be Tech Valley billionaires, Silicon Valley billionaires, who's basically, the answer to the question, how can we avoid the end of the world scenarios, their answer is, well, make AI even more powerful and solve climate change and solve cancer. And you even, you make it more and more powerful to the point where basically it solves all our issues, all our problems. Or as Sam Altman has also said, it's attributed to Sam Altman, the AI we see today is the dumbest it will ever be. Which is true, isn't it? What we see today compared to what we'll have in just a few years could be unrecognisable. So this accelerationist view, a little bit more about that, where there is this kind of techno-utopian vision of the future. The idea is that this super advanced technology enables us to produce radical overabundance, cure diseases, re-engineer ourselves in a transhumanist way, and colonise the universe. And that sounds a bit laughable, perhaps, but what's not laughable is the money behind it. Jan Tarlin said a while ago, I don't know where he got this from, that there is now more research, more dollar research going into AI than all other science and technologies put together, is what he said. Which, if that's true, that's astonishing. You think of space exploration, of medical research, of climate change, all the research going into those, add it all together, and he reckoned there's more going into AI. So trillions of dollars going into this isn't laughable. And they believe the way to achieve this kind of tech utopia is AGI. And by the way, you get to live forever for free. And someone's already mentioned different ways of doing that. Cryogenics, for example. Mind uploading, for example. Or simply using technology to more and more extend our lifespans, as is already happening. And there are, as you may know, specific organisations set up in Silicon Valley to solve the problem of death. That's what they believe they can do by pouring enough money at it. So the thing I said at the start, is there a God? There is now. It may not be so ridiculous to some people. And Mark Anderson, who was the founder of Netscape, if you remember that,
Yeah.
he's very rich since then, and as a venture capital company. In his opinion, developing AI to its fullest extent then, is actually a moral obligation that we have to ourselves, to our children, and to our futures. So then, if we're creating this godlike AI then, are we creating AI in the image of God? Or AGI is an idol. And you will all know that there's nothing essentially new about creating idols out of tech. To some extent, society's already done that. Whenever we use technology at the centre of our lives to seek wisdom, to ask questions, to seek guidance instead of God, we've made it into an idol, haven't we? Much more so with AGI. But there is something different about AI to all other tech idols, something significantly different. This one talks. In the this idol speaks. It can initiate conversation, offer advice, listen, engage in small talk, but speaking in our faith is foundational. It's central to what we believe, isn't it? That God spoke creation into existence, that Jesus is the Word become flesh. And so here apparently is an idol that seems to speak. And in the Old Testament, it's actually, this is used as a dividing line between idols and Yahweh. The idols don't speak. So there's a number of passages. Here's one from Psalm 115. But their idols are silver and gold made by human hands, says the psalmist. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see. They have ears but cannot hear, noses but cannot smell. While AI can apparently speak, see, listen. Can it smell? Can AI smell a flower? That's a question that some people are looking at. I think it depends how you define smell. So then at what point, at what point should we be worried about this? At what point could AI, in perhaps our experiences, in our lives, in our churches, in our congregations, become idolatrous? Sometimes it's obvious, I think. So if we're regularly using AI to write prayer and liturgy and sermons, it's already sold out to the idol. Sometimes it's not obvious. So I will use AI. I'll upload my sermon after I've given it and say, can you help me generate 20 life application questions that I can use for a small group? And I'll go through them and pick a few, change a few, add a few of my own. Is that idolatrous? I think everybody falls at a different point on this line, on this grey area. And the kind of concerning thing is not many churches have AI policies of how to use AI well. But, of course, in a strict sense, AI doesn't actually speak, does it? It uses language, a kind of statistical model of words and phrases and relationships between those words and phrases to generate speech, which isn't what we do when we speak. And could therefore the training of a large language model, where we're training a large language model with these words and phrases through language that we've uploaded, could that be comparable to the Old Testament idea of intricately using craftsmen who worked in gold and silver to create an idol? I think there is a comparison there. So, will this idol save us? I think there are people, as I've said, accelerationists, who will attribute salvific qualities to AGI. But we've always done that, we've always done that, really, even in the Old Testament. So now what we're doing is seeking a tech utopia with the power to heal, to provide, and with the promise of everlasting digital life. And I would say, if you took the words tech and digital out, that's what happened in the Old Testament. That's what it was about. So maybe everything changes, everything stays the same. Lastly, because you will, this is my last slide, because it is a dissenting conference, I'm not as dissenting as many people here, but Tim said you have to say something about dissent. And here's the little I'm saying about dissent. The counter-narrative for us then, how do we use these technology to affirm what is good while guarding our faith from elements that bring harm? And we do have this in our Baptist theology, don't we? Congregational ecclesiology, individual responsibility, which at the same time makes AI more easier for us to use because we make our own decisions on those things, but at the same time makes us less accountable to perhaps other church structures. And then, as I've said before, I think there is an issue. What we need to do is try and make ourselves more accountable, I think, to each other by increasing our digital literacy in areas such as AI, rather than giving in to silent adoption, where people just start using it because nobody's telling them not to, and not really owning up to it because it makes them feel they haven't done that, they haven't done it. And very last of all, here's a quote from a friend of mine who has said, Baptist minister, AI helps me in my practice as a dissenting minister. It is my conversation partner in developing my understanding of Scripture. I ask it questions like, what would someone who is black, female, gay or marginalised in some way, what would they hear from this passage or message? So they certainly feel that's how they use AI in a dissenting way. And thank you very much.